Hello everyone, welcome back to your channel Sprint Dev. This is Abhishek, and today we are going to learn about authentication using Keycloak, and we'll see with the help of an sample Angular application. Alright, let's get started. Hello. So basically before starting with the illustration and coding, let's quickly go through what is Keycloak and what it has to offer. Okay, so this is the official documentation. Let's go to about. Okay, so basically, Keycloak is an open source identity and access management solution aimed at modern application services. Okay, so in layman term, basically you don't have to deal with login forms anymore. You don't need to write the custom authentication logic in your application. All that can be delegated to Keycloak. These are the few features that Keycloak has to offer. Single sign-on. It means you don't have to log into all the applications. The main the all the subdomain applications will be automatically logged in once you logged into the main application. Then we have identity brokering and social logging. So the Keycloak can act as a identity provider as well as identity broker. So that means we can create new users and password and credentials inside Keycloak, or we can delegate that identity provider to some third party. It can be Active Directory, it can be LDAP, or something else. Similarly, social login. We can log in using Google, we can log in using Facebook, GitHub, LinkedIn, whatsoever is all are supported by Keycloak. All right. So let's uh, set up Keycloak first of all. For Keycloak setup, there are various ways with which you can set it up in your local machine. So there are either you can have this standalone server distribution, or you can have this container image using Docker. So I prefer to use the standalone server distribution, and it gives you more flexibility to manipulate the configuration files. So you would need to download Keycloak using this zip SHA one, and once you download it and extract it, you will be able to see something like this. Yeah, this is the directory where I extracted the zip. Here you need to go into the bin, then we will have standalone that sh file. Yeah, over here. So you can see standalone.sh file. So you need to execute it. This will take 5 minutes. So yeah, so as you can see, the Keycloak is up. Now we have to log into the admin console. To log into the admin console, you have to go to localhost 8080/auth. This is the localhost URL for the admin console. Get into it. Yeah, over here you can see there is an administration console. So if you are logging in for the first time, you have to set up the administration console credential. You have to set up user and password for the admin. So I have already done that, so I don't need to redo it again. I'll directly log in, but if you are a first time user, you have to set it up. Okay, let's get into administration console. Okay, here we are inside Keycloak. So inside Keycloak, uh, if you are a first time user again, then you won't be landing onto this page. You'll be landing onto the master realm. So you'll be able to see this page. So what is realm basically? So realm is, it manages a set of users, credential roles and groups. It's similar to space and org and foundation in other applications. Like in GitHub, you have a separate org for various applications, right? So similar to what we have in Keycloak, we call it realm. So if you create a user in a particular realm, it belongs to that realm. It You won't be able to log in with the same user for a different realm. Each realm has whatever configuration you do for each realm, it will be isolated for that realm only. It won't be uh, passed to other realm. You have to create separate configurations, separate users for each of the realm, and you can create as many realm as you want. So the default one comes with a master, and you can go it with your need. According to your need, you can create other realm. A user belongs to and logs into a realm. The realms are isolated from one another and can only manage and authenticate the user that they control. Okay, so let's create a new realm. I'll show you how to create. Over here, if you go to add realm, give some name, test, keep this as it is, create. Yeah, you have a realm now. Okay, so we have this identity provider. So if you can see identity provider, as I have already explained, like Keycloak can act as an identity provider or an identity broker. If you are using Keycloak as an identity provider, you will need to add users and manage users inside Keycloak. But if you are delegating the task of identity provider to some third party, for example, you can see the supported identity providers in Keycloak. You can use OpenID Connect, Keycloak OpenID Connect, and social. For social, you have this many options: GitHub, Facebook, login. So yeah, these are all the options that you can use. Feel free to experiment with these. So for simplicity, I'm going to use Keycloak as an identity provider and not as identity broker. So that means I will create a user and try to authenticate that user to our Angular application that I will create in a couple of minutes. Okay, so that's pretty much about the setup of the Keycloak. Let's start with our coding part. Okay, so before starting with the Angular application, let's quickly go through the flow that we are going to trigger during the authentication process. Okay, so auth2 specifies a couple of flows for authentication. So for example, we have authorization code flow, then we have implicit flow, then we have hybrid flow. So these are the flows that we can use. And for simplicity level for this tutorial, I'm going to use the basic one, that is the authorization code flow. Okay, I'll quickly explain how the flow works throughout the process. Okay, as you can see on the screen, I have a diagram for the authorization code flow. So this is our client. In our case, it would be our Angular application. This is the authorization server. In our case, it would be Keycloak. So the client prepares an authentication request containing the desired request parameters and sends the request to the authorization server. Step number one. Okay. Then the authorization server authenticates the end user. So this authorization So there will be two endpoint that will get triggered throughout the process for the authorization server slash authorize endpoint slash token endpoint. Some sort of that. Okay. So two endpoints will get triggered for the authorization code flow. After authentication, the authorization server returns an authorization code. It won't return a access token directly. It will return an authorization code to the client. Okay. Now that client needs to take the authorization code and go back to the server to a different endpoint. We call it the token endpoint and ask it, okay, can you please give me the access token, please? I have authorization code. The token endpoint would receive the authorization code and in return it will return a access token and an optional ID token. So we mainly need the access token and this ID token is optional. You if you configure it to receive it, you will get the ID token as well, but it's not mandatory. Okay, so this is the basic flow where we need to trigger two endpoints for the authorization server to get an access token. Okay, that is why it is called an authorization code flow, because in the first step we don't receive the access token, we get the authorization code. Okay, so similarly, I'll also explain the implicit flow, and you'll be able to see the difference between these flows. Mm, okay, yeah. So this is the implicit flow. So as you can see over here, the client, there will be a server. The client would send the request to the authorization server with the desired request parameters. And authentication, after successful authentication, it would return the access token after the first step only. And the client won't need to go to the token endpoint again to get an access token. Okay, it's a one step process. You are getting it after the first authentication step only. Now, the question would be, what is the difference between both, and where do we use each one of them? Okay, so there are pros and cons for both. All right. So if you look into the authorization code process, it's multi-step process. So the network calls would be more over here. For a single authentication flow, there would be multiple calls to our authorization server. Hence, a bit of delay. That can be considered as a con. But again, the good thing about this process is it's safe because you are not exchanging the access token through URI fragment. Okay, you are getting it first of all as a code, and then you are handshaking that code in return of a access token. So this is pretty much safe if we consider this is the implicit flow. Now in implicit flow, it's a one-step process, so definitely low network calls, low latency, it's fast, and that would be a pro for this um token, implicit flow. But the problem with this flow is the access token that gets transferred from authorization server is in URI fragment. So hence there might be a security vulnerability while using this implicit flow. Okay, so now don't stress too much. Once you get a heads up about this different kind of flows, you can deep dive into each one of them and see like what suits your need. Okay, in your application, according to your application, you can use either of them. Okay, then there is a one minor difference between both. In authorization code flow, along with the access token that you receive over here, you will also receive a refresh token that is mandatory. It's not mentioned over here, but along with the access token, you also get a refresh token because this access token is a short-lived token. It's a it has a TTL, okay, time to live. So we need a refresh token for periodic refresh. This token, okay, so that you don't need to re-authenticate again and again once the session expires. The refresh token will handle it for us. Okay. While in implicit flow, you don't get a refresh token along with the access token. But we know that access token is a short-lived token, so you will have to re-authenticate again once the session expires. All right. So that's pretty much about this authorization code flow and implicit flow. Let's move ahead with Angular application, our client, and let's start creating it. Okay. All right. So let's start with our Angular application. So basically, I bootstrapped a sample Angular application using engineer command. As you can see, the name is of this project is Keycloak Angular task. As of now, it has nothing. Let's add something to this, and uh, let's see if it is up and running. Choose printer. Okay, so let's start our application. This should take this shouldn't take a couple of minutes actually. Okay, so it's compiled successfully. Let's open it on browser. It's running on HTTP localhost 4200. All right, so we have the application up and running. Let's add code to it. We won't. We this tutorial is not focusing on the Angular part, so I'm expecting you to know pretty basic Angular stuff. Not in, not to be an expertise in this. Just a basic one. Yeah. All right. So first of all, let's create a component GGC header header. So we have our header component. Uh, let's add something to our header. Div plus header div plus row div column md right h1 text align center to be value to be Each for tag. And function on click. So this will log out. Alright, so as of now we don't have this logout function in component ts5. Let's add it. Logout. That's it. Um, let's add some CSS to it. We have dot header class, background color. Let's call it a combine. Width 100%, adding 3%. Yeah, that's it. Now we need to include the header component in our app component. So header is our selector. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much for the header part. Let's see how it looks. Alright, the compilation is done. Let's go to a browser. Alright, that would do the work. We have our to-dos, title and logout button, which as of now does nothing. Okay, so let's add some body related code in our app component HTML. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to add a table. Let this name table. I'm going to copy this and paste it 2 times. This is the name. Let's Let's date to be finished. That will do. Right. Let's add body. First, let's call task one. Let's say the status is completed, and the date, select a random date, so 1 10 2020, and I'm going to select this and paste it to my time. Alright, this will be my number 2 task. Let's call it 2, assign it pending. Yeah, this will be my number 3 task. Task 3, completed again, some date. Alright, compile successfully. Let's see. Alright, so looks like we did a mistake somewhere. Let's see. Oh, alright, so some technical errors. And is there PTH that is missing? 3. Similar for this part. Alright. TH. Alright, that looks fine. I think we're good. Okay, that looks pretty fine. Now, let's do the Keycloak integration into our Angular application. Okay, so before integrating Keycloak into our Angular, we need to add two dependencies for the Keycloak. I'll quickly add those. Install. The first one is Keycloak Angular 7 version 21.0. This will take few seconds. Come on, be fast. All right, one dependency has been added. Number two, npm install. Next one is JS. JS 8.0 and 2. So that's all the dependencies that we need for Keycloak integration. All right, so both of the dependencies has been added. Now let's integrate to our application. So first of all, let's create a util folder util and we'll add the initializer to our. So we need a Keycloak initializer into our regular application, which should add those config which we need to add those configuration, like what is the RAM that we want to connect to, what is the app that has been configured in the Keycloak. All right, so let's util, create a new file. Let's call it app.ts. All right, so let's import first of all Keycloak service from Keycloak Angular. Okay, then I'm going to create this function, call it initializer, call it initializer with Keycloak service. So basically this would be async one, so that's why we need to use promise, and I'm going to return promise Mm, and from here I'm going to return another promise. This is just Keycloak configuration. You don't need to remember all of this. You can easily get it. All right. So here, this is the structure, and then we need to add a try block and await Keycloak service. Keycloak.init function, where we have the config. So here we need to add three parameters: the URL of the issuer. I'm going to keep it blank as of now because in a couple of minutes I'm going to show you from where you can get that. Realm, the realm name which you are going to connect to, and client ID. So the client ID is basically the name of the Angular application with which you are going to register into Keycloak. That name I need to mention over here. So let's keep it blank as of now. We'll see. First of all, we need to configure that in Keycloak, then we'll come back here. Then load. Uh, let's fill it with some blank. Then some few parameters like load user profile at startup. That I need to mention false. Some init options. So init options we have onload. Onload I want login. Login required. And check login in frame. Again, all of these you don't need to remember anything. You can get it easily from the Keycloak official documentation. They have the JavaScript adapter, so you can refer it as well. So that's the try. So I'm going to add a catch in case of any error. I'm going to console it. Chapter. Yeah. So for the Keycloak initializer, I guess that's pretty much it. So we are going to fill this URL environment client ID in next few minutes. So before that, we need to add this initializer in our app module. So let's go to app module and we in the providers array we need to add provide underscore initializer and use factory that would be the initializer cloud service and multi true. All right, so that's pretty much it for this. Now we have to add our application, or you can say register our application into Keycloak. So let's go back again to Keycloak. Yes, let's log in with our admin. So okay, so as you can see over here, I have created the test RAM, and here inside clients. So how do we add our application? So inside clients, we need to create a client ID. You can call it anything. To do, I'll call it to do UI. The root URL is this one, localhost 4200. So once you add this, just click on save. You will be redirected to this screen. Client ID, to do UI. Keep it as it is, the default ones. The client protocol will be OpenID Connect. Alright, that is based on OAuth 2 itself. The access type is public. That is stay as it is. This is the thing that we are concerned about. The standard flow enabled. It means the authorization code flow is on. So by default, you will get the authorization code flow. So if you want to use any other flow, you can see there is an implicit flow enabled as well, but it's off. So you need to enable this one and tweak your application a bit with separate configuration for the implicit flow. But right now we are going to use authorization code flow, that means standard code flow. So we'll keep it as it is. Then the root URL that you have mentioned over here, that the URL of your application. All right, and after login, where do you want to redirect? This is the redirect URL. All right, that's it. That's pretty much it. So you need to add this client ID to your application, app initializer, client ID to the UI. The realm is our test. Okay, and the URL. So URL is the issuer URL. So the issuer URL is basically URL of the admin console. Okay, so if you can see the what was the admin console, it was localhost localhost equity/auth. Right? URL of your Keycloak. That is the issue. This authorization server. Okay, so that's all the configuration that we have. And I'm going to save it. Received all the. I registered my application into Keycloak. Now, would I be able to log in? That's the question. So let's see. Start the application. All right. So the project has been compiled successfully. Let's see if we are able to log in. Going to localhost 4200. That is our current application. All right. So we have a nice login form over here that has been provided by Keycloak. All right. There's this username and password, but we don't have any user or password configured yet in Keycloak. As you remember, we have not configured it yet. So let's go and configure our user first of all. This is our admin console. I am in the test realm. Going to the user section, you can see there are no users. Let's add a user. I'll call it Abhishek. Okay, that's all I need. Save. Set a password. Go to the credentials tab. Password. Set password. Yeah, that's all. That's all you have to do. Go to the users and you will be able to see a new user has been created with the username Abhishek and ID associated with it. So this is how we are using Keycloak as an identity provider because we are managing all the user in Keycloak itself. So it's an identity provider now. Let's try to log in with the user that we've created just now. Shake, password, and log in. Alright, you need to change your password to activate your account. No, I don't want to do that. Okay, so let's do some. Let's. Right, so we are here now. We are able to log in with the user that we have created right away. All right, but there is one thing more that we need to do. That is the logout button. We need to configure it as well. So let's add some code to the logout. So header component.ts with the logout function. Let's import Keycloak first. Keycloak service into Keycloak, um, Keycloak Angular. That's right. Inject it into the constructor. And we need to call the logout method of Keycloak service. This dot Keycloak service dot logout. That's all. That's all we have to do. Let's go back to Check it out if it works or not. Log out. Yeah, let's try it again. Login. So I'm able to successfully log in. Now let's try to log out. Yeah, over here. So that's how we are able to integrate any Angular application with Keycloak and use Keycloak as an identity provider. Again, there are a lot of features that Keycloak provides. For example, like I've already explained it to you that we can use social login, we can use some other identity provider, Active Directory, and use Keycloak as identity broker also. So feel free to experiment with those. And similar thing we can do in Java as well. It's like like in this tutorial we integrated with Angular, but similarly we can integrate Keycloak with Java as well. So please let me know if you want a tutorial for the Java and Keycloak integration. I'll be happy to build it for you. And alright, so that's all for this video. Hope you found this video useful. If you did, then please do like it, subscribe it, and share it with your friends. And I'll see you again in next video. Alright, have a great day. Bye bye.